For most of her life, Queen Elizabeth II was seen only through ceremony, balconies, processions, and speeches. But the real story of Britain's longest reigning monarch often unfolded far from the public eye, in the quiet ritual of her meals. Her food habits weren't about luxury or status. They were about discipline, tradition, and a kind of comfort that never changed, no matter how much the world around her did. Morning rituals of a monarch. Every morning began with the same deliberate calm that defined her reign. There was no feast waiting, no heavy breakfast that one might imagine fit for royalty. Instead, the Queen began her day with a simple bowl of Special K cereal, poured into a small porcelain dish. The portion was measured, not a flake more than she required. Sometimes she added a few slices of banana or a sprinkle of berries, depending on the season. If she wasn't in the mood for cereal, she would have toast with marmalade, and not just any kind. The same Wilkin & Sons Tiptree marmalade from Essex she had used for decades. That small jar of orange preserve became a quiet constant across her years of service, a memory of post-war Britain she never left behind. On days when the air felt colder or when guests joined her table, she would occasionally request scrambled eggs with smoked salmon, soft and buttery, never dry. Her former chef once remarked that overcooked eggs could end a career. Sometimes a few thin slices of black truffle were added, but only on special occasions and always sparingly. And then there was her tea. The Queen's love of tea was legendary. It had to be Earl Grey, steeped at the perfect temperature, served in fine china, and taken with just a touch of milk. Never sugar. The handle of the cup was always turned the same way. The teaspoon always rested at a perfect angle. To anyone else, these were trivial details, but to her they represented order, a small, daily ceremony of calm. The light and loyal lunch. If breakfast reflected simplicity, lunch represented precision. The Queen preferred meals that were light, neat, and quietly elegant. Her midday favorite was often grilled fish, most commonly Dover sole or haddock, seasoned gently with lemon, salt, and a hint of herbs. Her side dishes were equally restrained: steamed carrots, courgettes, or spinach, chosen according to what was fresh. The palace kitchens followed the rhythm of the seasons, not the whims of a menu. Every plate was carefully inspected before it reached her table. A story often told by former staff recalls a time she returned a dish because a few peas had rolled into the sauce. No anger, no scolding, just a calm reminder that tidiness was a form of respect. Her meals weren't lavish, they were deliberate. She didn't eat to indulge, she ate to sustain herself for the duties ahead. And in that sense, her dining table became a mirror of her public life, modest, structured, and quietly firm. Sunday comforts and family tradition. Sundays, however, brought a change in rhythm. At Balmoral Castle, surrounded by the Scottish hills and the scent of pine, Sunday meant one thing: roast beef with Yorkshire pudding. It was the meal that anchored the royal week. The beef was carved thick, the potatoes roasted golden, the gravy poured just enough to coat, but never flood, the plate. The Queen's own portion was smaller than the rest of the family's, but she never missed it. The sound of laughter, the aroma of rosemary drifting from the ovens, the corgis waiting near the kitchen door. It was a picture of warmth, rare in her otherwise formal life. This wasn't the grandeur of banquets. It was the comfort of habit. In a world that changed constantly around her, the Sunday roast stayed the same. It was, in her own quiet way, a form of home. The sacred hour of tea. At precisely 4 p.m., no matter where she was, afternoon tea was served. It was the Queen's most cherished daily ritual, a moment untouched by time or politics. The menu never strayed far from tradition. cucumber sandwiches with the crusts removed, egg and cress rolls, and fruit scones served with jam and clotted cream. Her Majesty always spread jam first, then cream, the Cornish way, even when visiting Devon. This small act, too, reflected her adherence to tradition. And then there was the dessert that would follow her across decades, palaces, and continents. The chocolate biscuit cake. It wasn't elaborate, just crushed rich tea biscuits bound with dark chocolate, chilled into a firm loaf and sliced clean. But it had to be made to exact specifications. Neither too sweet nor too rich, and always available. If there was one slice missing, she noticed. When traveling abroad, the royal staff ensured that a chocolate biscuit cake was always prepared and stored wherever she stayed. One aide once joked that the Queen's cake had traveled more miles than most people's passports. She adored it so much that Prince William requested it as his groom's cake at his wedding, a tribute to the dessert that symbolized not luxury, but consistency, royal rules, and forbidden flavors. While her favorite foods were simple, her dislikes were absolute. At the top of her banned list was garlic. She didn't merely dislike it, she forbade it. Garlic was never allowed in any dish prepared for her. The reason was practical. She found its lingering smell unpleasant, especially before public appearances or long, formal dinners. Even at state banquets where kings and presidents dined, garlic was forbidden. Her chefs learned early that if a dish even whispered of garlic, it was gone. Next came shellfish, another item permanently absent from her table. This was partly due to royal protocol. Shellfish carried a risk of food poisoning, but for her, it became a firm personal preference. Lobster, oysters, crab, mussels, none were ever served. Once, during a diplomatic visit, a foreign chef proudly presented her with a seafood platter flown in that morning. The palace staff quietly intervened, replacing it with roast lamb before it reached her. The gesture was polite, discreet, and entirely understood by everyone in the room. The wartime appetite. To understand her simplicity, one must look back to her youth. During the Second World War, the young Princess Elizabeth lived through rationing like the rest of Britain. Butter, sugar, and meat were scarce. Meals were plain, ingredients stretched as far as they could go. It was in those years that she developed her lifelong appreciation for simple, hearty food. Meals that symbolized survival. One dish in particular carried that memory throughout her reign. Fish pie. Creamy white fish in a thick sauce, covered with buttery mashed potatoes and baked until golden brown. For her, fish pie wasn't comfort food. It was remembrance. It reminded her of nights in Windsor Castle during air raids, sharing supper with her sister Margaret, their laughter echoing against the drone of sirens. Those moments, humble as they were, shaped her lifelong philosophy. That food was not luxury, it was continuity. Meals on the move. Even during international tours, the Queen's food preferences traveled with her. Her advance team would arrive days before her to inspect local kitchens, check cleanliness, and test the ingredients. Every menu was carefully pre-approved to avoid surprises. Her requests were always simple. No exotic spices, no garlic, no shellfish, and nothing overly rich. In one well-known instance during her visit to the United States, she was offered an elaborate menu of truffle pasta and seared duck. But after a long day of ceremonies, she asked for scrambled eggs and toast instead. It was a moment that left the hotel chefs astonished. But it perfectly captured who she was, a monarch surrounded by opulence who preferred the taste of home. The diplomacy of dining for the Queen, food was not just sustenance, it was symbolism. At state dinners, she approved each dish herself, ensuring it carried a message of national pride. The menu would feature Scottish salmon, Welsh lamb, or Norfolk strawberries, highlighting the unity of the United Kingdom through its produce. Each plate became a quiet act of diplomacy, every ingredient chosen to tell a story about the land and the people she represented. She rarely finished a full plate, but she always expressed polite appreciation. Her table manners were legendary. Small bites, minimal crumbs, and never a drop spilled. Those who dined with her often remarked that eating beside her felt less like a royal occasion and more like being part of a perfectly choreographed ballet of etiquette. The Christmas tradition. If one meal captured the essence of her reign, it was Christmas lunch at Sandringham. Each year, the same dishes, the same schedule, the same family gathering, unchanged for decades. At exactly 1 o'clock, the royal family would be seated for roast turkey, mashed and roasted potatoes, Brussels sprouts, carrots, and pigs in blankets. There were no modern twists or substitutions. Everyone knew the menu by heart. Afterward came the Christmas pudding, doused in brandy and set alight before being brought into the room. The Queen always smiled at that moment. The spectacle, the smell, the memories. She didn't have a large sweet tooth, but she always had a slice. It reminded her of her father, King George VI, and of wartime Christmases when everything was rationed, except hope. The quiet indulgences. Despite her discipline, the Queen did have her indulgences. Before lunch, she enjoyed a small glass of Dubonnet and gin. 2 parts Dubonnet, 1 part gin, a slice of lemon, and a couple of ice cubes. She'd been drinking it since the 1950s. And it remained her quiet afternoon companion. Her snacks, too, followed strict standards. No crumbs, no mess, and no fuss. Sandwiches were always rectangular, crusts off, small enough for 2 bites. She preferred egg and cress, cucumber, and smoked salmon with lemon butter. Round sandwiches were avoided, not out of superstition, but practicality. Rectangles stacked better. Even her picnic baskets at Balmoral were arranged with precision. Wax paper, linen napkins, reusable tins. Inside were cheddar sandwiches, fruit cake, and sometimes potted shrimp, a favorite from her childhood seaside trips to Eastbourne. And her beloved corgis? They, too, dined like royalty. Fresh chicken, rice, and vegetables, often hand-fed by the Queen herself. Their meals were written on a daily menu and prepared with the same care as hers. The taste of legacy. In her final years, her meals grew smaller, but the ritual never changed. Tea at 4, cereal in the morning, a glass of Dubonnet before lunch, and the occasional slice of chocolate biscuit cake when it was ready. They weren't the meals of a queen trying to impress. They were the meals of a woman who found comfort in routine. To outsiders, it may sound ordinary, even shockingly simple, but therein lies the truth. Her food choices weren't about indulgence. They were about discipline, memory, and identity. Through her meals, she connected with her people in the most human way possible, through the quiet rhythm of tradition. Even now, long after her passing, those small choices live on in Britain's kitchens. Toast and marmalade in the morning, tea poured with care, and a modest slice of cake enjoyed at day's end. Because the truth about Queen Elizabeth's favorite dishes is not that they were royal, but that they were real. In their simplicity lay her strength, in their constancy lay her grace, and in their enduring presence, the timeless taste of her reign.